The elegant dining room of the Harrison family mansion felt suffocating as I sat across from my sister Emma, watching her perfectly manicured fingers trace the rim of her wine glass. Our monthly family dinners had become an exercise in endurance, each gathering a fresh opportunity for her to remind everyone of my apparent failure. "So Sarah," Emma's voice carried that familiar note of condescension, "still running that little vintage clothing shop downtown?" I took a slow sip of water, hiding my smile. If only she knew that little shop was just a hobby, a front for my real empire. "Yes, Emma. Still there." My parents exchanged that look I'd grown accustomed to over the years, a mixture of disappointment and resignation. In their eyes, I was the daughter who had thrown away a promising future in finance to play shopkeeper. "You know," Emma continued, reaching for the crystal decanter, "my tech startup is really taking off. We're meeting with a major investor tomorrow. One of those mysterious Silicon Valley types who practically owns half the tech world." She paused for effect. "The kind of success you could have had if you'd stuck with your MBA instead of this." I thought about the stack of investment proposals sitting on my desk at Vertex Ventures, my private equity firm that managed over $12 billion in tech investments. Emma's startup was just one of hundreds seeking funding this quarter. She had no idea she'd be pitching to me tomorrow, or rather to Alexandra Stone, the reclusive founder of Vertex. "Not everyone needs to run a tech company to be successful, Emma," I replied mildly, passing the bread basket to our father. She laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound I'd heard so many times before. "Of course not. Some people are content with smaller dreams." Our mother jumped in, ever the peacekeeper. "Emma dear, perhaps we could talk about something else. Sarah's shop is quaint, and she seems happy." Quaint. The word echoed in my mind as I thought about the meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Emma would walk into my sleek downtown office, expecting to meet the legendary Alexandra Stone, never suspecting that her failure of a sister was the billionaire investor she'd been desperate to impress. I hadn't planned it this way. 10 years ago, when I left my promising career in investment banking, my family thought I was having a breakdown. The truth was, I'd seen an opportunity they couldn't understand. While working at Goldman Sachs, I developed an algorithm that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. Instead of sharing it with my employers, I quit, sold everything I owned, and started trading with my own money. The vintage clothing shop was perfect cover, a small business that nobody would look too closely at, while I built something bigger in the shadows. The first million came quickly, then 10 million. By the time I started Vertex Ventures, I had turned my initial investment into over $100 million. Now, 5 years later, I was one of the most influential tech investors in the country, not that anyone knew my real identity. "Tell us more about your startup, Emma," our father encouraged, beaming with pride. "Sarah, you could learn something here." Emma straightened in her chair, practically glowing. "Well, we developed a revolutionary AI platform for predictive analytics. Our preliminary numbers suggest we could corner the market within 2 years. We just need this investment to scale properly." I nodded, thinking about the flaws I'd already spotted in her business plan. Her company's algorithm was derivative, their market analysis superficial. Tomorrow's meeting would be interesting. "The investor we're meeting," Emma continued, "they say she's brilliant but absolutely ruthless. Alexandra Stone. Have you heard of her?" I nearly choked on my water. Ruthless wasn't a word I used to describe myself, but the media loved painting that picture. "The name sounds familiar," I managed. "Of course it just sounds familiar to you," Emma rolled her eyes. "You're too busy color-coding vintage dresses to keep up with the tech world. She's practically a legend. Nobody knows what she looks like. She's never appeared in public or had her photo taken. But she's got this incredible track record of picking winning startups." If only she knew that her mysterious investor spent her Sundays sorting through vintage Channel and Dior, finding homes for beautiful pieces of fashion history. Some people preferred to stay out of the spotlight, I offered. "Please," Emma scoffed. "When I'm running a billion-dollar company, everyone will know my name. I'm not going to hide behind some mystique like Stone does." Our mother touched Emma's arm proudly. "You always did know how to command attention, dear. Unlike Sarah." She glanced at me apologetically. "Well, some people are just more suited to smaller ventures." I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment alone. In my purse, my phone buzzed with a message from my assistant. Ms. Stone, final background checks on Harrison Tech completed. Several red flags in their financial projections. I typed back quickly, meeting still on for tomorrow. I want to hear their pitch. When I returned to the dining room, Emma was showing everyone her company's website on her tablet. See, we've already got interest from major players. Tomorrow's meeting is just a formality, really. I mean, who wouldn't want to invest in this? I thought about the 3 other AI companies in my portfolio that were light years ahead of Emma's technology. It looks interesting, I said diplomatically. Interesting? Emma's voice rose slightly. It's revolutionary, but I wouldn't expect you to understand. How's the vintage handbag business going? Actually, I smiled. I just acquired a rare 1956 Hermes Kelly bag. The previous owner was a tech executive who lost everything in bad investments. Interesting story, really. Emma missed the warning in my words, too caught up in her own narrative. Well, after tomorrow, I'll be able to buy all the designer bags I want. Not second-hand ones, of course. As dessert was served, I watched my sister hold court, detailing her plans for after she received her investment. A mansion in Pacific Heights, a private jet, a yacht, perhaps. Our parents hung on every word, occasionally glancing my way with pity. I thought about my penthouse overlooking the bay, the private island I'd bought last year, the fleet of cars I rarely used. None of them knew. None of them had ever bothered to look past the surface of my little shop to see what I was really building. I should head out, I said, standing up. Early day tomorrow. Got a shipment of vintage dresses coming in. Emma smirked. While you're sorting through old clothes, I'll be securing my future. Don't worry though, once I'm successful, maybe I'll let you handle my dry cleaning. I hugged our parents goodbye, enduring their well-meaning but condescending advice about it's never too late to go back to finance. As I walked to my car, a deliberately modest Audi rather than the Bentley parked in my garage at home, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow would certainly be interesting. What Emma didn't know was that I'd already thoroughly investigated her company. I'd seen the inflated projections, the technical shortcomings, the questionable market analysis. Tomorrow, she would walk into my office expecting to dazzle Alexandra Stone with her revolutionary vision. Instead, she would learn some hard truths about both her business and her assumptions about success. As I drove home to my penthouse, I thought about how appearances had always mattered so much to my family. Emma, with her designer clothes and loud ambitions, was their idea of success. Me? I was the disappointment who had settled for less, the cautionary tale they whispered about at family gatherings. But tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, Emma would learn that sometimes the biggest success stories are written by those who work quietly, away from the spotlight. Tomorrow, she would discover that her mysterious billionaire investor, the woman she'd been desperate to impress, was none other than her failure of a sister. I smiled as I pulled into my private garage, thinking about the look that would cross Emma's face when she realized the truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's letting them prove themselves wrong while you build an empire in silence. The next morning, I arrived at Vertex Ventures headquarters 2 hours early. The entire floor-to-ceiling glass building belonged to my company, though officially it was owned by a web of holding companies that all led back to Alexandra Stone, my carefully crafted alter ego. My executive office occupied the entire top floor, with views of the San Francisco Bay that still took my breath away. I deliberately decorated it to project power while maintaining mystery, minimalist furniture, abstract art, and strategic lighting that would keep my face in partial shadow during meetings. Miss Stone, my assistant Michael appeared at the door. Harrison Tech's team has arrived. They're 30 minutes early. Of course they were. Emma always did like to appear eager. Let them wait in the conference room, I instructed, adjusting my outfit one last time. I'd chosen a Tom Ford pantsuit in charcoal gray, with subtle Bulgari jewelry, elegant but not flashy. My hair was swept up in a sophisticated chinen, and I wore glasses I didn't need, another layer of disguise. Also, I added, make sure the cameras are recording. I want to document this meeting. 20 minutes later, I watched through one-way glass as Emma paced the conference room, smoothing her designer dress repeatedly. She was accompanied by her technical co-founder, their CFO, and, to my surprise, our father. Daddy decided to come support his star daughter, I murmured to myself, checking my watch. Time to begin. I waited exactly 7 more minutes, long enough for Emma to start fidgeting, before entering through the private door. The effect was immediate. Emma's practiced pitch smile faltered slightly as she tried to make out my features in the carefully arranged lighting. Good morning. I kept my voice deliberately lower than usual. I'm Alexander Stone. Please be seated. Our father leaned forward, squinting slightly. I saw a flicker of something cross his face. Recognition, perhaps, quickly dismissed as impossible. Miss Stone, Emma began, her voice pitched higher than normal. Thank you so much for meeting with us. We're incredibly excited to present Harrison Tech's revolutionary AI platform. I gestured for her to continue, saying nothing. Emma launched into her pitch, complete with flashy slides and ambitious projections. I watched as she promised impossible growth rates, claimed technological capabilities her team couldn't possibly deliver, and dramatically oversold their market position. Finally, she finished with a flourish. With a $50 million investment, we'll dominate the market within 2 years. Any questions? I let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. Several, actually. Let's start with your core algorithm, the one you claim can predict market trends with 99% accuracy. Yes, Emma beamed, it's completely revolutionary. Interesting. I pulled out a tablet, because I'm looking at your technical specifications, and they seem remarkably similar to a pattern recognition system that was developed 3 years ago. In fact, I pulled up a side-by-side comparison. They're almost identical. The blood drained from Emma's face. Her technical co-founder suddenly became very interested in his shoes. That's just a coincidence, Emma stammered. Is it? Like how your market size calculations conveniently ignore 3 major competitors? Or how your financial projections assume a growth rate that no company in this sector has ever achieved? Our father cleared his throat. Now see here, Miss Stone. No, Mr. Harrison, I cut him off. You see here. I stood up, walking around to their side of the table. Your daughter's company has inflated every metric, oversold every capability, and essentially created a fantasy wrapped in technical jargon and pretty graphics. Emma's lips trembled. You don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly. I reached up and removed my glasses, stepping fully into the light. I understand exactly who you are and how you operate, Emma. The room fell silent. Emma's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Our father gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles turned white. Sarah, he whispered. Surprise? I smiled, not entirely kindly. The mysterious Alexander Stone, the billionaire you've been so desperate to impress. She's your little sister who runs that tiny vintage shop. Emma shot to her feet, her chair clattering backward. This is impossible. You're nothing. You sell used clothes. No, Emma. I run a $12 billion investment firm. The vintage shop is just a hobby, something I love doing when I'm not managing one of the largest tech portfolios in Silicon Valley. Our father found his voice. But how? I walked back to my side of the table, enjoying the shift in power. Remember when I quit Goldman Sachs? Everyone thought I was having a breakdown. The truth is I developed an algorithm, a real one, not the copied version your company is trying to pass off as innovation. I used it to trade my own money, built it into a fortune, and then started Vertex Ventures. Why didn't you tell us? Our father asked, his voice small. Would you have believed me? You were too busy celebrating Emma's every minor achievement to notice what I was building. I turned to my sister. By the way, those market trends you claimed to predict last quarter, you got them from one of my subsidiary company's public reports. Emma sank back into her chair, her perfect facade crumbling. So you brought us here just to humiliate me? No, I sat down again. I brought you here because you need to learn some hard truths. Success isn't about appearing successful. It's about building something real, something valuable. Your company, as it stands, is smoke and mirrors. What are you going to do? Emma whispered. Tell everyone. Ruin me? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Actually, I'm going to offer you a choice. Option 1. I expose the flaws in your business and you face the consequences of your deception. Option 2. You accept a smaller investment, $5 million, not 50, with the understanding that you'll rebuild your company the right way, with proper oversight, real innovation, and no more shortcuts. Our father reached for the folder with trembling hands. You'd still invest? After everything? Family is family, I said simply, even when they've spent years mocking your choices. Emma was crying now, her expensive mascara leaving black trails down her cheeks. I don't understand. You let me treat you like dirt for years. You sat there at dinner last night and listened to me brag about meeting Alexander Stone. And it was quite entertaining, I smiled. But now it's time for you to decide. Do you want to keep pretending to be successful, or do you want to learn how to actually build something meaningful? The next hour was intense. We went through their real numbers, their actual technological capabilities, and what it would take to turn their company into something legitimate. By the end, Emma's perfect posture had crumpled, but there was something new in her eyes. Perhaps the first glimmer of genuine humility I ever seen there. As they prepared to leave, our father lingered behind. Sarah, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, I replied. Just stop measuring success by appearances. That evening, I went to my vintage shop, among the carefully curated pieces, each with its own history and story. I felt more at peace than I ever had in the corporate world. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. I'm sorry. For everything. Can you teach me? Really teach me. I smiled, running my hands over a 1960s dyer gown. Come by the shop tomorrow, I typed back. We'll talk about what real success looks like. A week later, my mother called, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Darling, about our Sunday dinners, would you prefer we have them at your place now? No, I replied, I like coming to the house. But maybe we can stop pretending that success only looks one way. Over the next few months, things shifted. Emma stepped down as CEO of her company, taking a lower position to learn the business properly. Our father stopped bragging about stock portfolios at family dinners, and my mother, surprisingly, developed a genuine interest in vintage fashion. The shop remained open, my beloved side project where I could escape the pressure of being Alexander Stone. Emma started visiting regularly, not to compete or compare, but to actually talk, really talk, for the first time in our adult lives. I still can't believe you let me make a fool of myself for so long, she said one day, helping me unpack a new shipment of vintage channel. You needed to learn something important, I replied, carefully hanging up a 1950s suit. Success isn't about looking successful. It's about building something real, whether it's a tech empire or a vintage clothing shop. She picked up a delicate silk scarf, examining its pattern. Or maybe both. I smiled. Or maybe both. The headlines still refer to Alexandra Stone as a mysterious figure in the tech world. Speculation about her identity appears regularly in financial magazines. But now, when my family reads those articles, they smile knowingly and keep my secret. Success, I've learned, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about being true to yourself, whether that means running a multi-billion-dollar investment firm or carefully preserving pieces of fashion history. Sometimes it means doing both while letting others figure out their own path to understanding what really matters. Last week, Emma brought a client to my shop. My sister, she introduced me proudly, is the most successful person I know. She didn't mention Vertex Ventures or Alexandra Stone. She didn't need to. The vintage shop's bell still chimes every time someone enters, and I still love the sound. It reminds me that sometimes the smallest things can bring the greatest joy, and that success doesn't always need to announce itself to be real. As for Alexandra Stone, she's still making waves in Silicon Valley, but these days, she's a little less mysterious at family dinners.
I was standing at this kitchen sink, scraping the last bit of salad dressing into a Tupperware, when Mom said it calm as you like she was reading off the weather. We're out of oat milk again. Can you pick some up on your way home from work? I didn't look up. I just pressed the lid down and asked, Is this for you or for Lauren's hormones? She didn't laugh. She never does when it's about Lauren. It's for her tea, she said, folding the grocery list like it was a church bulletin. She needs to relax before her flight. I paused. What flight to Reykjavik? Didn't she tell you a beat? It's for her women's retreat. Iceland. Cold air is good for resetting cortisol levels. The faucet kept running. My hands were wet. I turned around slowly. She's going to Iceland. Mom blinked like I'd asked something odd. Just a few days. Spa resort. It's all very holistic. She's been so stressed lately, Cassie. I stared at her. Iceland. Spa. Holistic. Stressed. That was the word she used. Not irresponsible. Not unemployed for 19 months. Not the reason I've been covering the mortgage, the groceries, the phone plan, the utilities, and apparently now the oat milk for Icelandic hormonal balance. How's she paying for it? She won it, Mom said quickly. A raffle or something online. Of course she did. She won a retreat to Iceland in a raffle, I repeated. Yes. A pause. Don't sound so skeptical, Cassie. She deserves something good. I dried my hands slowly. The edge of the dish towel caught on my ring. When I got promoted to team lead last year, I said, "You said congratulations," and then asked if I could help with the water bill. That was your whole response. Mom's face tightened. That's not fair. No, I said. It isn't. From the hallway, I heard the jingle of keys. Lauren breezed into the kitchen like it was her private runway. She was wearing the parka I gave her last Christmas. The one she said was too boring. She looked radiant. She opened the fridge. Where's the oat milk? I didn't answer. Mom handed her the folded list. Cassie's picking some up. Lauren kissed her cheek. Thanks, sis, she said without looking at me. Then she floated out the door just like that. I watched the door close behind her. The silence after felt heavier than before. I thought she was broke, I said. She needed the trip, Mom replied. You don't understand how hard it's been for her staying home all day. I didn't argue. The sink was still running. I didn't turn it off. Because deep down, I knew something was off. Not just this trip, not just the oat milk. It had been off for a long time. I just didn't want to be the one to say it. Not yet, but that was about to change. The next day, I searched Retreat Iceland raffle just to see if it was a real thing. It wasn't. I wasn't surprised. I asked Mom about it again over dinner casually. She was reheating something frozen and pretending it was homemade the way she always did when she wanted to look like she was holding the household together. So, what kind of raffle was it? She blinked, then looked down at the microwave like it had just said something inappropriate. Just a travel sweepstakes thing, she said. You know how Lauren is with those online entries. She's always entering something. I took a bite of dry meatloaf and nodded slowly. Funny she didn't say anything. She usually brags about things like that. Mom gave me a look. She probably didn't want to upset you. You've been working so hard lately. That was new. Concern. I'm not upset, I said, and I wasn't. Just tired. Tired of being treated like the backup generator of the household. Always humming, always running, only noticed when something breaks. The next morning, the credit card company called. I was in a meeting when I saw the number flash across my phone. I let it ring twice, then answered something in me said I shouldn't wait. This is Andrea from Goldline Credit. The woman said polite but firm. We're calling to verify some activity on your account. I stepped out of the room. What kind of activity? Multiple high-value transactions out of Reykjavik, Iceland, she said. Luxury lodging spa services retail. Just confirming you're traveling. I closed my eyes. No, I said. I'm not. A pause on her end. Would you like to freeze the card? Yes, I said, immediately. $24,000. That's how much had been charged to my gold card in under 3 days. I scrolled through the itemized report she emailed me. Boutique hotel, private tour, thermal spa, 4 restaurants, and something labeled Glacier Heli Excursion. I forwarded it to myself, then printed it at home. I left the pages on the table where Mom always read her paper. I didn't say anything. That evening, I came home to a strangely calm living room. Mom was folding laundry with extra purpose. Dad, who rarely spoke unless ESPN was on, cleared his throat. She didn't mean anything by it, he said. I waited. The card was just lying there. You always leave it out, Mom added. It's not like she stole it. I picked up the page from the table, held it up. $24,000 in 3 days. She thought it was expiring, Mom said quickly. She didn't want it to go to waste. I stared at her. She said that I asked. Mom hesitated, more or less. I didn't say another word, just picked up the paper and went upstairs. On the voicemail, Lauren's voice was chipper. Hey, sis, she said. Looks like the card stopped working. Can you fix that? I still need to book the ice cave tour. Love you. She hung up without waiting for a reply. I didn't tell them right away that the card was frozen. They found out the next morning when Lauren called from the hotel lobby. Mom was in the living room pouring her third coffee of the day. The mug said, "Grateful Heart" on the front. She says her card isn't working. Mom said, "Phone to her ear." I didn't look up from my laptop. "No, it isn't." She blinked. "You turned it off," I reported it stolen. I said calmly. Dad from his recliner. "That seems excessive." "She took it without asking," I replied. "That's theft, last I checked." Mom's voice was tight. "You always overreact." Lauren called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Seriously? You canceled it." "I have things booked, Cass. That's incredibly immature. I was going to get you something." That last part, I don't know why that made me laugh. Maybe because it was said with such confidence, as if a t-shirt from a tourist shop justified $24,000 in unapproved charges. Later that day, Mom knocked on my bedroom door. She hadn't done that in years. "We need to talk," she said. I shut the laptop. She stepped in and sat down like she still had authority in the room. "She's stranded. She's in a 5-star hotel. She has no food money. She ordered truffle risotto last night. It's on the invoice. She's your sister." That again. That ever-reliable script. Family. Obligation. The eldest daughter as contingency plan. I sat up straighter. "Do you remember when I was in college and got that stomach ulcer from working 3 part-time jobs?" Mom looked uncomfortable. "You're bringing that up now." "I called you crying," I said. "I needed help with a hospital bill. $2,000. Silence. "You told me Lauren needed braces more." She pressed her hands together. That was a different time. It was always a different time. She looked older in that moment, not just tired, but exposed. Like the lines around her eyes weren't just from age, but from holding a mask too long. Then she did something I didn't expect. She reached over and put her hand on mine. "I know we didn't always treat you fairly," she said. "But right now, she really needs you." I didn't pull away, but I didn't nod either. I thought of the voicemail, the receipt, the way Lauren said, "Fix it," like I was tech support, not her sister. I thought about the day I turned 16 and they gave her a car and me a savings bond. I thought about the time she borrowed my rent money to start a business and then bought concert tickets. And I thought about the house, the deed in the drawer, the one Dad signed over to me 5 years ago when he couldn't cover the back taxes. The deal was simple. I pay, I own it. I thought about all of that and then I smiled. "Okay," I said. Mom looked up surprised, relieved. "You'll help." I stood and walked to the dresser, pulled open the top drawer and took out a different card. Black, clean, unused. "This one's still active," I said, handing it to her. "Book her whatever she needs." She took it like it was forgiveness, like the world was right again. I watched her leave the room, and then I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in a while. "Grandma," I said, "are you still looking for kitchen help at the cafe?" The next few days were strangely quiet. Lauren's calls slowed down after the third voicemail. She'd moved from cheerful to annoyed to something that sounded like passive apology. She never said the word sorry, but there were enough sighs and drawn-out pauses to let me know she thought that counted. Mom started moving with a little more softness. Less commanding, more suggestion, like offering a cup of coffee when I came home. Like asking how work was but not waiting for the answer. And me, I smiled. I nodded. I said yes. I handed them a card. It wasn't the gold one. That one was gone dead buried. This one was black newer. It had been sitting in the back of my drawer for over a year. I'd gotten it after a client event never used it. I activated it, set a limit, and handed it over. "She still has some things to cover," I said neutral. "Flights, meals, whatever." Mom looked like she'd just been handed a second chance. She didn't ask why the card looked different. She didn't ask why I activated one I hadn't touched in months. She didn't ask anything. That was how I knew she was still playing her role, and that she thought I was still playing mine. Lauren texted the next night, "Cards working." "You're the best. I'm bringing back a surprise." I didn't answer. Instead, I packed 3 boxes and booked a moving service for the following Tuesday. Just clothes books, paperwork, the things that mattered. The rest could be replaced or forgotten. I called the realtor the next morning. Her name was Andrea. We'd met once at a networking event 3 years ago. She remembered me. asked how the house was holding up. I told her I was ready to let it go. She didn't need to know the rest, only that the deed was in my name, that I was the sole signatory, and that I'd be out by Friday. She said she had a buyer who'd been waiting on this block for months. We scheduled the walkthrough. In the garage, I found the copy of the tax transfer papers Dad had signed. I'd kept them in an old folder marked temporary. I never changed the label. Upstairs, I removed the framed family photo from the hallway, the one from Christmas 7 years ago. I'd been cropped at the edge, barely a shoulder. It used to bother me. Now it made sense. I was never really in the picture, just close enough to cast a shadow. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not yet. I left the key under a rock in the garden for the moving crew. Marked the boxes kitchen documents don't lose. Then I drove to Grandma's. She opened the door like she'd been expecting me. No questions, just a nod and a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I have 3 rooms," she said, and no patience for nonsense. I smiled. Perfect. Inside, the house smelled like flour and tomatoes and old wood. The kitchen was loud clatter orders shouting in English and Spanish and something in between. Her cafe hadn't changed. Neither had her rules. "You ready?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." She wiped her hands on a towel and looked me in the eye. "They'll show up. When they do, I'll handle it." I know, and I did. They came back on a Thursday, mid-afternoon. Sky, half-cloud suitcase wheels dragging over the walkway like a warning. I was waiting. Not inside the house. On the porch swing. Lauren got out of the car, first, smiling like we were sisters who actually talked. "You came to pick us up." I didn't answer. Dad grabbed the bags. Mom reached for her keys. She tried the lock. Then again. She looked at me confused. "Did you change the door code?" "No," I said. "I changed the lock." She blinked. "Why, you don't live here anymore." She laughed that dry-clipped laugh she used when something made her uncomfortable. "Cassie, come on." I stood up slow, walked down the steps, and handed her a manila envelope. Inside, signed closing documents. Sale confirmation. Wire transfer receipt. Andrea had worked fast. The buyers were moving in on Monday. "I sold it," I said. Lauren frowned. "Sold what?" "The house." Her face fell like a dropped plate. "You can't do that," she snapped. "That's illegal. This is Dad's house." Dad opened the envelope. His face went pale before he even reached the second page. "Cassie, you signed the deed to me 5 years ago," I said quiet. "Remember when the IRS came?" He opened his mouth, closed it, sat down on the curb like he needed air. Mom's voice sharpened. "You had no right." I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't flinch. "I paid the back taxes. I've paid the mortgage, the bills, the maintenance, the repairs. For half a decade, I've kept this house standing. You just lived in it." Lauren stepped forward. "So where are we supposed to go?" I handed her a second envelope. She opened it. Inside, an address, a set of keys, and a sticky note in Grandma's handwriting. "Room upstairs. Work starts at 6. Apron on by 5:45. Mom stared at the paper like it was written in code. "You sent our things to your grandmother's. I sent your things to your mother," I corrected. "And she agreed to take you in. As long as you pull your weight." Lauren scoffed. "You think she can tell me what to do? She's been doing it since before you were born." Dad finally spoke. "What about the card?" I turned to him. "Which one?" "The black one. The one we used." "Oh," I said. "That wasn't mine." Lauren stiffened. "What?" "That card was yours," I said, meeting her eyes. "You opened it 2 years ago, left it in a drawer when you quit that copywriting job." "I never used it," she snapped. "You did now." She looked at the paper in her hand, then back at me. "You're lying." I didn't reply. The moving truck pulled into the driveway. The new owners stepped out, a couple with a baby and a dog, beaming. I turned back to my family. "You have 3 days to vacate Grandma's guest rooms." Mom's mouth opened, closed. I didn't wait for what came next. I walked to my car, started the engine, and left. No speech, no last word. The house was already gone. So was I. It was quiet for a while after that. No calls, no voicemails, no late-night knocks on my door. Just peace. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Nothing fancy. 2 rooms, soft light, no shared walls. The kind of silence you don't realize you've missed until you finally get to keep it. Work picked up. I stopped checking my bank balance 3 times a day. I stopped flinching when the phone rang. I bought flowers for my own kitchen table, not because it was anyone's birthday, just because I liked the color. Then one morning, Grandma called. She never starts with small talk. They're adjusting, she said. I didn't ask who. Your mother scrubs pans slower than I'd like, but she's doing it. Your father learned how to fold napkins poorly. And your sister, she finally figured out how to clock in on time. I didn't say anything. Grandma sighed. They're not saints, but they're different. Some things can only be learned by sweat. That night I couldn't sleep, not from regret, just weight. The kind you don't realize you've been carrying until someone names it for you. The next week I stopped by the cafe, not to talk, just to see. The back door was propped open. The usual smells garlic oil yeast wrapped around me like a coat I hadn't worn in years. Through the kitchen window I saw them. Lauren wiping down Counter's hair, tied back sleeves rolled. Dad folding paper menus into neat stacks. Mom, hands in dishwater mouth, pressed into a line. None of them looked up. I didn't go inside. I just stood there watching, not with anger, not with pity, just clarity. They looked like people who were finally being asked to hold up their end, and for once, no one was reaching for my wallet. I walked back to my car. Later that week, I got a letter, handwritten. My name in careful cursive I hadn't seen since childhood. Inside one line, "You were right. I just didn't want you to be." Mom. No apology, just that. It was enough. I folded it, slid it into a shoebox with a few other things I hadn't thrown out yet. An old photo, a birthday card from Grandma, the receipt for the back taxes I paid the year they nearly lost everything. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just closed the lid. Months passed. Seasons changed. Sometimes I'd hear about them secondhand through Grandma or a friend from church. Lauren got a second job. Dad fixed the cafe's leaky pipes. Mom started baking again. None of it made me feel anything big, just something small. Like, maybe... The ground had settled. One Sunday, I walked by the old house. New paint, new flowers, a tricycle in the driveway. I didn't stop, didn't slow down, because this wasn't a story about getting back what I lost. It was about leaving before I lost myself, and making sure no one ever erased me again. See, the email showed up on a Tuesday mid-morning. It came without fanfare. No urgent subject line, no red flag, just a quiet line in my inbox, final transfer. Elm & Co. It was from Knox & Associates, the legal firm my father had worked with since the early days. I wasn't listed as the recipient, but someone had copied me in, maybe by mistake, maybe not. Out of habit, I opened it. I didn't expect anything, certainly not what I found in paragraph 3. Effective January 1st, full operational control equity transfer and brand title of Elm & Co. will be reassigned to Ms. Chloe Ellison. I read it twice. Then once more, just to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, not in the transfer, not in the acknowledgments, not even in the CC line. I wasn't overlooked. I was removed. I sat there for a long time, not in shock exactly. More like the moment after a sharp fall when your body hasn't started hurting yet, but you know it will. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it made too much sense. For the past 7 years, I'd lived and breathed that company. What started as a dusty dry goods store at the edge of Vermont had become a multi-million-dollar lifestyle brand. I built the product lines, hired the teams, sourced the packaging, created the supplier pipeline from scratch. The shift to certified organic, that was me. The rebrand, me. The new revenue model that kept us alive through COVID, also me. I still remember pitching the expansion strategy in our first investor meeting while my father sat 2 seats away saying nothing. Now it belonged to Chloe, my younger sister, the one who'd once said, "I don't get why you work so hard for soap." She came back 2 years ago from spiritual travel, took a few photos in front of the store, and somehow became head of community. At first I laughed. Then I stopped laughing when Dad started bringing her to calls. When she started speaking for the brand. She's fresh, he told me once. The kind of energy investors notice. I gave him the numbers. He gave me a smile. That email, that quiet little email, was the confirmation I didn't ask for. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I just closed my laptop and stared at the wall behind it. One question wouldn't leave me. When exactly did they decide I no longer existed? And the one that hurt more. Why did they think I wouldn't fight back? I didn't reply to the email. I didn't forward it. I didn't even mention it to anyone. Instead, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, the original archive I built when we were still calling it the shop, not a brand. Inside were early brand assets, PDFs, mock-ups, supplier contracts, handwritten timelines, copy drafts I'd written on flights and edited between shifts. It wasn't nostalgia. It was record-keeping. I'd always been the one who kept the paper trail. The first logo file was still there. I remembered drawing it on the back of a napkin at a coffee shop near the co-op after a buyer said our packaging felt too forgettable. I stayed up that night teaching myself Illustrator, trying to make something that looked like memory. Soft type A, curling ampersand like a root, simple grounded mine. Dad had said it looked a little handmade, but I convinced him to test it. It tripled our wholesale orders in under 3 months. I pulled up the current website. The ampersand was gone. So was everything else I recognized. New logo, new name, new tone. Under our journey, the story began in 2021. Not a single photo from before. Not a mention of our first storefront or the 5 years we spent loading boxes ourselves. Just Elma Studio was founded by Chloe Ellison as a space for intentional beauty and mindful design. I searched for my name. It wasn't there. I checked the blog archive media mentions the press section. Nothing. The interview I did with our first national stockist gone. The local article where I explained our early product sourcing process not linked. Even my quote about small rituals, the one that used to be printed on the inside flap of every box replaced by a line from Chloe. I want every product to feel like light in your hands. I opened Chloe's LinkedIn. She had updated her title, founder and CEO, Elma Studio. Public speaker, brand visionary. In one video clip, she held up the bar soap I spent 3 winters perfecting, the one we used to call Snow Day. She smiled and said, "This one's my favorite. I made it for my mom." I watched in silence as she described the scent like it came from her childhood, not mine. They hadn't just taken the business. They'd rewritten its origin story. And I wasn't just cut out, I was smoothed over. They'd lifted the language, the ideas, the textures, but not the fingerprints, not the parts that pointed back to me. I checked the brand's latest investor deck. In the milestone slide, the timeline started in 2021. It listed first major retail partnership, which I had negotiated in 2019. Sustainable pivot, which I had pitched during lockdown. The only thing new was the name. I thought back to something Dad once told me during a late-night strategy meeting. No one remembers who poured the concrete. They just see the windows. At the time, I thought he meant we were a team, that he was reminding me not to chase attention. Now I realized he'd been telling me the plan. He never intended to build the story around me, just on top of me. I didn't call my father. I didn't reply to Chloe's text. I didn't write a long email or request a meeting. I didn't ask why they erased me. I already knew. They didn't think I'd push back. They thought I'd do what I always did, let it go, work harder, carry the weight quietly. But this time I didn't carry anything for them. I started walking backward, not in regret, but in precision. Brick by brick, memory by memory. The first thing I did was check the lease on the original Elm & Co. storefront. The one on Main Street with the peeling brick facade and the warped wooden floors. I used to mop myself. It had changed hands when we expanded, rolled into a management shell company that Dad and I set up years ago. I still remembered the LLC name. It took 5 minutes to look it up. 10 minutes to realize the lease was expiring in 30 days. I drove out the next morning. The street hadn't changed much. Same hand-painted signs, same faded cafe on the corner, same couple arguing outside the laundromat. The shop windows were empty now, the new flagship was across town, but I could still see the tape marks where I used to hang promo flyers. I parked and went straight to the leasing office. Linda still worked there. She'd been the one to approve our first lease when I was 23 and too nervous to make eye contact. She blinked when she saw me. "Mara Ellison," she said, half smiling. "Now there's a name I haven't heard in a while." I told her I was interested in the space again. She raised an eyebrow. I thought your sister was running things now. She is, I said. Linda waited a moment. Then she leaned forward, lowered her voice. Well, that space is about to be available again. Payment lapsed. I don't think they're keeping it. I signed the paperwork that same afternoon. I walked through the empty store. The lighting was poor. The floor still creaked near the back storage room. There were marks on the counter from when I spilled candle dye during our second product test. They never came out. I ran my hand across the wall where I used to write delivery notes in pencil light enough to erase, but dark enough to see if the sunlight hit just right. Next, I contacted our first lavender supplier, a family farm 2 counties north. I still had the daughter's number saved in an old folder. I called her. She remembered me. Your sister's people stopped ordering from us last year, she said they were going global. I asked if they'd work with me again. She said yes. After that, I tracked down Martin, the printer, who ran our first ever batch of labels. I still remembered the layout error in batch 1. The scent name had bled too close to the edge. I drove to his warehouse. He hadn't changed a bit. You want the old files, he asked. Nobody ever came back for those. I took them. By Friday, I had the lease, the supplier, the packaging, the original design files in the same barcode range we started with, all under my name. I didn't post about it, didn't announce a comeback. This wasn't a comeback. I wasn't building something new. I was rebuilding what never should have been abandoned. Not because I wanted the world to see it, but because I needed it to exist somewhere that wasn't buried under polish and press photos. They had the name. They had the followers. They had the packaging. But I had the scaffolding, the people, the smell of cedar oil that stuck to my coat in winter. That was enough. The first call came 3 days after I signed the lease. Dad's name lit up on my phone like it had so many times before, during the build-out, during supplier delays, during late-night margin checks when we still did everything ourselves. I didn't answer. He called again the next day, left a voicemail this time. Hey, Mara. Just wondering how you're doing. Haven't heard from you. Give me a call. I didn't. Instead, I drove to the shop and stood behind the old register. I ran a dry cloth across the wood, even though there was no dust yet. I rewired the back lights, replaced a broken drawer pull that had been loose since year 2. Things no one else would notice, but I did because I'd put them there. 2 more calls came that week, one from my mother. She never called. Her message was short. Whatever this is, you're making things harder than they need to be. I let that sit. I didn't answer texts either. Chloe sent the first one. What are you doing at the Main Street space? No greeting, no sign of confusion, just a direct shot. It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. I didn't answer. Then came the letter, a clean PDF from their legal team addressed formally to my business address. It was a courtesy inquiry asking for clarification on whether my new activity constituted an attempt to commercially compete using overlapping brand assets. I printed it out and left it on the table while I drank my coffee. I read it again slowly this time aloud to see how it sounded. Then I replied. 1 page. Simple. The physical property at 118 Main Street, as well as product formulations, visual design templates, and original copy language were developed and filed under my name between 2016 and 2020. Any overlap results from your continued use of materials that predate current leadership. Please direct future communication to council. I mailed it. Certified, tracked. After that, the calls stopped for a few days. Then Chloe showed up in person. I was restocking tea tins on the back wall when I heard the door open. She walked in like she'd been sent, clean lines, polished voice. Mara, she said, we need to talk. I stood, wiped my hands. You're here now, I asked. After 2 years of talking for me? She didn't answer that. She looked around the store. You're rebuilding it. I'm remembering it, I said. She exhaled, frustrated or maybe just unsure. Dad says you're trying to take it all down. I looked at her, really looked. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid I'd make people remember the version of the story where she wasn't there. I'm not trying to take it down, I said. I'm just taking back the parts you didn't know were real. She didn't respond. She left without touching anything. And I went back to shelving tins 1 row at a time. They didn't take me seriously. Not really. Even after I reopened the old store, even after I stocked the shelves with familiar shapes and scents, even after I stood behind the same counter they had once called too small town for a national brand, they thought I was making noise, symbolic protest, a message from the bitter sister who didn't move on. Maybe they expected me to lash out, demand a seat back at the table, but I wasn't interested in their table. I had already built the floor they put it on. I just needed them to remember that. The second legal letter came by mail, signed by an attorney I didn't recognize. It wasn't friendly. It accused me of infringing on intellectual property product names, scent formulas, packaging layouts. They said my new store caused confusion with their current brand identity. It was dressed up in legal terms, but the message was simple. You're trespassing on what we built. What they didn't realize was that I never left. I didn't panic. I didn't even get angry. I walked to the back office, opened the file drawer marked Legal, 2016, and pulled out the documents they forgot existed. There, it was a notarized agreement signed by my father and me listing every original formulation, every visual layout, every written phrase used in our first 3 years. Ownership mine. It wasn't just a creative folder, it was the foundation, and they never transferred it. Back then, Dad told me we didn't need to hire a lawyer, said it was better if I held the original documents until we figure out how big this gets. We never followed up, and they never asked for the transfer. So I filed everything under my name, quietly, permanently. I put together a reply. 1 packet. Neat, thorough, annotated. I listed what I owned, the lavender and citrus blend we called Rainlight, the original Ritual Care tagline they still printed on boxes, the layout templates I created in PowerPoint when we couldn't afford a designer. I cited registration numbers, included timelines, then I added one sentence centered and bold. You have 14 calendar days to discontinue use of the attached intellectual property. Failure to comply will constitute willful infringement under federal law. I sent it by courier. Certified. No email, no heads up. 4 days passed. Then 7. On the 9th day, a junior lawyer from their side called and asked if I'd consider a licensing agreement. Legacy partnership, he called it. Said they wanted to honor the roots. I said no. Politely. No explanation. Just no. Day 12. Chloe posted a video. She stood in a neutral-toned studio with soft music playing behind her. We're entering a new chapter, she said, a reimagined brand that reflects who we are now, not where we began. The caption was full of buzzwords, growth-forward vision. But what I saw was something else: withdrawal. Over the next month, their packaging changed, the copy softened, the names disappeared. The labels got cleaner but emptier. One by one, the things I made stopped showing up in their feed. No one announced it. There were no headlines. But I knew what it meant. I didn't sue. I didn't go public. I didn't send a final message or leak a single file. I just watched as they erased what they once took quietly and completely, because they no longer had the right to hold it. I never wanted to destroy what they built. I only wanted them to stop building it on top of me. The rebrand happened quietly. No public apology, no announcement of rights transferred or names removed. Just new packaging, new language, a reshuffled website. Elma Studio became Studio Elma. The shelves looked cleaner. The copy sounded vaguer. The core faded. They moved on, and I let them. I didn't respond to the lawyer's final offer. I didn't check the trademark filings to see how much they had changed. I didn't walk past the flagship store again. I didn't need to. What mattered wasn't whether people knew what I did. It was that they couldn't pretend I hadn't done it. About a month later, a package arrived at the store. No return address. Inside was the black moleskin notebook I thought I lost in year 3, the one I filled with scent ratios, price projections, small sketches in the margins. On the inside cover in my handwriting was a line I wrote during a snowstorm when we couldn't afford a generator and worked by candlelight. If we ever forget how this started, we lose the right to say what it is. There was no note, but the postmark said Portland. I put the notebook in the drawer under the register. Not to keep it safe, just to keep it near. That spring, the shop filled slowly. A few locals remembered it. A college student wandered in looking for something for her mother. An older man recognized the smell and said, Didn't this place used to carry that cedar soap? I nodded. We still do. He smiled, picked up a bar, held it to his nose. Smells like the old days. I didn't explain. Didn't need to. I restocked the shelves, cleaned the back room, replanted the herb box near the window. I ordered another round of labels, same design. No logo this time. No tagline. One morning as I was opening up, a woman stood outside the door. She hesitated before coming in. She looked around, slowly touched the wooden counter, scanned the shelves like she was looking for something she couldn't name. After a while, she asked, "Is this new?" I smiled. Not really. She nodded. Bought a candle. Didn't ask for a bag. As she left, she paused and said, "It feels like something that remembers. And maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not credit, not revenge, not even recognition. Just a place where the version of the story I lived, the one I built, was still alive, untouched by edits. Something that remembered.